Well, seeing as the Steam Summer Sale is in high swing just about now, I thought that since I had a rather diverse list of acquired goods from my initial haul, I would do a little grab bag video going through speedier, even more hastily thrown together reviews of some of the games I've finished thus far. Right, so let's start with something I just barely completed before the sale, Yakuza Kiwami. The Yakuza series follows the titular Japanese gang and their sometimes extremely over-the-top serious business dealings, for about 3 minutes before they decide nobody really came here for that, and then all of a sudden you're dashing around Japan looking for some guy hiding in a dumpster waiting to beat you up. Kiryu, that is, the guy that has a perpetually petrified untucked collar and somehow never gets his suit dirty while throwing thugs against dirty alleyway street floors, is not only the prime definition of a Renaissance man, but also the giver of extremely wise, sage advice. Between singing at karaoke parlors and structurally rearranging the biological architecture of street gangsters, he happens to keep an extraordinarily profound outlook on most aspects of life. It almost makes you wonder if there really could be something to just going out and pissing the utter day away by beating the utter piss out of people. It's really fun and an excellent brawler if endless fighting and silly minigames are your thing. Thumbs up. Next game, whoops, turns out it's just a remaster, really pulled one over on you there. Except for this version of Katamari Damacy is re-rolled, which is very, very special, I assure you. In all honesty, Katamari has always been a 10 out of 10 franchise, and this remaster comes as a very welcome addition. Now you can still actually see the screen during dialogue, and a few other quality of life changes like frame rate buffs, sexy new font, and really, what more could you possibly need? It's freaking Katamari. You play as a tiny little man who rolls an increasingly big ball of household objects until you get big enough to assimilate even the largest of rubber toys kept in your mom's nightstand. If you haven't played it already, you're missing out by a lot, so this is great for fans new and old. Although I do wonder why they went to all the effort of remastering it if they weren't going to let you play as the tens of colorful cousins the prince has. There is such a thing as being too faithful to the original. I mean, good God, just look at Crystal Pepsi. The difficult part about a remaster is that no matter what you do, it's always an adaptation of the original, so choosing what to keep and what to change becomes vital to the finished product. And while this game was incredibly safe, it would be refreshing to see bolder choices in upcoming remasters. And what I mean by that is, of course, adding a Battle Royale mode to every game in existence. 10 out of 10, green check mark, let's move on. The Witness. Oh boy, this was disappointing. The Witness is a puzzle game that, like the ancients of yore, features absolute puzzle gameplay. Only instead it gets boring after 2 hours instead of the usual 3. The thing with The Witness is that all the puzzles operate on the same grid-looking thingy, and it's your job to figure out what parts of said grid-looking thingy are required to be navigated in order to solve it. First, it's just a line. Point A, meet point B, but as you go through the game more, things get a bit complicated. Now you have to draw a line through a bigger pattern, make sure you're going through dotted areas, avoid hitting yourself, and oh yeah, also line it up with the actual world in the background. Initially, I thought this was pretty cool, and that if each area in the game had as unique and fun ideas as these, it would stay fresh for a long while. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of crashing and burning, in the sense that if a particular gimmick for an area doesn't jive well with you, i.e. anything pretty much past the first 3, you're stuck staring at it for a long while, wondering maybe if you looked at it from a 70.6 degree angle instead of a 70.5, you'd be able to decipher its meaning. This became standard after only a little bit, and true to its name, The Witness became me witnessing what it is truly like to experience being brain dead. That is, puzzle make my head hurt. And oh my, are there a lot of puzzles. You get to what feels like the end, only to be confronted with like 50 more screens that, to be fair, have some pretty original mechanics, but I just couldn't be bothered to care after spending so long wondering why everything in the game didn't explain anything in the game. They do a bit of environmental storytelling, and you have some clues scattered about the world, but you make it to the end and it just takes you back to the beginning, and then closes your game. I would look more for some sort of answer, but to reiterate, the game was already closed, and the uninstall button was just right there. Thumbs down unless you can take being bored while being tortured. Thief Simulator VR is a string of words you have never thought of before this moment, and a concept that I had never even considered would make an entertaining game, but here we are. The gameplay has some really interesting stuff in it. Sure, there's all the usual sneak around and snatch precious family heirlooms to bankroll your growing heroin collection, but what's more is that everything has this nice ebb and flow to it that makes you appreciate the little stuff. For instance, once you've burgled all you can carry, you gotta get out of there, so you run over to where you parked your car and actually drive out of the subdivision. I know it seems like a simple concept, but there's something so novel to actually climbing in and sitting down in a VR car, let alone speeding it away. The essence of this game lies within the detail. Sure, the objectives are simple, but you gotta scope it out first. You may have to buy a fancy kind of lockpick or steal specific items. One mission I was on just had me create a disturbance by throwing a brick through the window, and barring anything I may or may not have said in the heat of the moment, the striking thrill I got from outrunning the cops was feasible. Still, power trips aside, the game was lacking enough for me to refund it. And not even the fun kind of lacking where you clip into a toilet. No, more like the annoying kind where half the time your character decides what you're doing isn't really important and you no longer have control of your hands. Apart from a few minor injuries, it wasn't all too bad if the game as a whole just had a lot more polish. I mean, I cranked my graphics up to full and they still looked nothing like the Steam store screenshots, so, you know, what the hell? I get there was no E3 this year, but that doesn't give you the right to blatantly lie about the quality of a game from the store page. Instead, you should be doing that in front of millions of your adoring fans. Other than the bad things, there is actually some envelope-pushing stuff here in terms of the VR market, and it would be nice to see this game with a lot more work done. Neutral thumb sideways. Definitely hold off on getting it, at least until it's had some more work put in. Bright Memory is actually a demo release for the full game, which you entitle yourself to upon purchase of said demo. So you get what is essentially an appetizer to a meal you have to wait on for about a couple months. Normally, I would say that this game feels a bit more flashy than it plays due to its tendency of having impressive graphics and about 5,000 bugs waiting to throw you through an invisible wall at any moment. But alas, Fallout 4 has already been made. Todd aside, when you realize the game was made pretty much entirely by one guy and still stands just 1 or 2 levels below Doom on a gameplay scale, suddenly the gravity of the prospect of a full-on release gains much more traction. I mean, I couldn't make a video game that looks this good. I'm willing to bet you can't, at least not alone, and here shines the true spirit of Bright Memory. It's original. The style is good, the world is crazy and unique, and I have a feeling a certain Hideo Kojima may take interest in the developer's ability to model rainy, rock-filled terrain. Take it as what you will, but if more up-and-coming developers like these can get attention from publishers, maybe we wouldn't have to put up with buying either the new dark, gritty third-person shooty yearly release or the new dark, gritty first-person shooty yearly release. Try it if you're interested, but it's probably not for everyone. Thumbs up. Firewatch is a game that combines all the fun of outdoor wilderness navigation with all the horror of outdoor wilderness navigation. Featuring a main character with more emotional gridlock than me trying to decide between breakfast and lunch at McDonald's, Firewatch tells a surprisingly realistic and concise story over the course of just a few hours, but it definitely feels like it's worth the price. The two main voice actors pretty much carry most of the experience, and even though games of these variety have often tried and failed horribly at putting you in the shoes of a relatable protagonist, Firewatch exceeds where most others did not. There's a lot to be said about video games that are packed with content, but there's something equally valuable about a game like Firewatch, where the primary stuff you do, that is, the only stuff you do, is stuff you actually want to do. The detail is in the pacing. Most of the time you have the same motivation as the character you play as, something vital to creating a lasting and relevant narrative, and yet something so often lost on the world of developers and writers bent on getting you to sympathize with their shell of an angst-filled, quote-unquote, deep character. This is just a personal theory, but maybe the impact is made in the fact the protagonist is just a normal guy. People don't want to be railroaded into making decisions they themselves could never empathize with, and even if developers have a problem with not being able to fill a character to the brim with their novels of backstory and depth, there is something to be said about showing nuance over time than simply having the characters scream their dispositions into the void.
You can't just have your characters announce how they feel! That makes me feel angry!
In the rarer times this game goes on sale, I do recommend getting it, but be sure to understand that it's less of a typical video game, strictly, and more like the perfect hybrid of a game and a movie. Thumbs up all the way. Well, that seems like enough for right now. I hope you found something that interests you and that you may not have heard of yet. And I also hope I can get another one of these out before the sale's over, but I know that even off sale, some of these are still definitely worth looking into. And if none of these sounded interesting to you, I don't know, go outside?